Let's start here. This week, a foreign leader was taken out, people were killed, and another country was casually discussed like something you could just acquire. And most of us didn't feel much of anything. That's not because nothing happened. It's because your nervous system has learned to keep going when coherence disappears. When power stops explaining itself, the real question isn't whether you agree. It's what happens to a society that adapts instead of pushes back. This episode isn't politics. It's a warning sign. If things feel off but are hard to name, stay. That feeling is the point. Welcome to Shrink the Nation.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you.
Hey, I'm David. I've got over 20 years in the military. I am a board-certified psychiatrist, actually twice boarded. I have been sipping on Cooper's Craft 100 proof
for way too long.
Waiting for Robbie to get his shit together.
Yeah.
Watching the wild card weekend of the NFL playoffs, I realized I have to correct a horrible wrong from several episodes ago that we never swung back around to. Patrick Mahomes did not attend Texas A&M. He went to Texas Tech. He's a Red Raider. And I said it twice. What a dipshit.
I didn't know either, but I still stand behind the fact that A&M fans are the worst in America.
They might be. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Johnny Manziel went to Texas A&M. Yes, he did. He was an Aggie.
Yeah, he was an Aggie. He's also terrible. So
no, he's not. Well, he wasn't terrible. He was terrible sober. He didn't want to be sober and
right.
Awesome. Shit-faced. He was awesome. Yeah. Just like us. Watchable with the drink in hand.
Yeah, the problem wasn't him. It was him sober. That was the problem. Hey, it's Rob, 26 years in psychiatry, boarded in psychiatry, and then 30 years-ish in the military, and super excited this evening to continue our discussion about taking over countries.
Yeah. What are you drinking, Robbie?
I'm not saying.
Oh, come on.
No.
Share with the good people. Share with all tens of our fans.
Yeah. For our tens of listeners. I've been on a streak the last couple of weeks in which I just didn't make it to the store in time to get anything for this. And this evening I went to a store, not the liquor store, but a store. And the only thing they had that was alcoholic were White Claws.
You're going to give us the feminine perspective?
Yeah.
What store did you go to? Sephora?
Yeah. I got some makeup stuff, and and this makes it even better. I got green apple.
You're drinking fucking pucker.
Drinking green apple White Claws. And really, I'm only going to drink 2 or 3, largely just to get nicely lubricated to discuss the state of the world, because otherwise I don't know if I could. I really think I need to be just a touch GABA inhibited in order to discuss what's going on right now.
We're going to do something a little bit different. There are 3 things that happened over the last week that we want to talk about. Getting into the politics of them isn't really what we do. It's more of the broader psychological concepts behind what allows these things to happen. We're not even through the weekend yet. And so by the time this posts, who the hell knows? There could be 3 more. But we're going to go with these 3 big ones and really want to talk about, to frame this, the psychological processes that are impacting us, the people, and how we're viewing these things. I think I said that right. I've been drinking a lot of bourbon.
Close enough. And folks, I'm going to apologize for David because I did put him on hold on a very extended period. So he started drinking thinking that the episode was gonna start, and then I put him on hold. He's been drinking for a while.
Yes, I have. All right. If you heard our intro, you know the topics. So, Robbie, when you look at everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks, what strikes you more, the event themselves or how little emotional response they seem to generate nationally.
Well, very much like last week, I'm still struck by how little the population has been impacted emotionally by some really large things. The attack on Venezuela is huge. I mean, it's huge. It is, I can't say unprecedented, but it is close. There's very little precedence to support that. The transition from we're protecting our nation from fentanyl, which is utterly false, but it was the narrative that was being portrayed, to we're taking oil. And it didn't land with a bang. It landed with a whimper. Nobody seems to be terribly impacted by this. And then the shooting of an individual in Minnesota equally has hit with, I mean, the news channels that do this sort of thing, they put some emphasis on it, but it's stunning to me that it still does not feel like it is hitting with the kind of weight that it should. And again, I feel like this is a collective dissociation. This is habituation. We've been through so many crisis, overwhelming, anxiety provoking things that we're just at a point where we're like, meh, and we move on with our day.
When you strip out the policy details, what do you hear changing in the tone of how power is talking right now?
You know, that struck me as the most interesting thing. Not to pick on Lindsey Graham. Nah, let's pick on Lindsey Graham, clutching his pearls, and he probably gets the vapors. I don't know. Every time I hear Lindsey Graham talk, I do end up thinking about Gone with the Wind, and it seems like he gets the vapors. At any rate, Lindsey Graham's an interesting character for me. And he always has been. Lindsey was regulated when John McCain, now I'm thinking of Die Hard,
Die
McClane.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah, McCain was his buddy, and McCain regulated Graham to a large extent. Actually, I've lost sleep about this. I have actually woken up in the middle of the night thinking about Lindsey Graham, which is not healthy, folks. You know, for our tens of listeners, I don't think anyone should get so wrapped up in anything that they're losing
Freud would
sleep.
say about that.
Yeah, no doubt. But he was absolutely giddy. I mean, giddy. He was almost uncontained after the attack on Venezuela. And then he took it, 5 steps farther, in which, all right, now we're going to go attack Cuba. And he shows up on I think it was Fox News, but where he pulls on a hat that says, "Make Iran great again." I can't
Yeah.
even say it without laughing. Make Iran great again. What struck me, really, I mean, his giddiness was silly. Silly is the best I can do for it. But what really struck me was the reaction formation. And for our tens of listeners, when I say reaction formation, that's when you have an emotional response and you do the absolute opposite of what that emotion is. What your feeling is, you play out an emotion that is the opposite and to the extreme. So let's say the book answer would be, you want to punch your brother, and instead you talk about how much you love your brother and you do things in accordance with that. And what I've seen across the board is this reaction formation in which something that I think should have made us all feel very uncomfortable with the utilization of our power, what that sphere of politicians and the political folks who are involved in this, what we have seen is they have treated it with almost glee. I mean, this emotional response in which they are proud. And I don't necessarily think they're proud of it. I think they realize that we're stepping outside of the norms. We're doing something that is questionable, but they have emotionally portrayed it with just goddamn shy of glee.
All of it, not just Maduro, not just the oil, but even the ICE shootings. There's what I expect when you have such polarized perspectives, and that's kind of what we're seeing. Really, it's just cross splitting, which is trying to make everything bad or everything good. It's just so black and white. And I'm seeing that. I guess that's what I expect to see. What I'm surprised about is more of the numbness that happens when it's just everything that happens now is going into that split. where if it's coming from MAGA, this is the best thing ever. It was completely justified. These are horrible, horrible humans. And if it's coming from the other side, it's no, this is horrible and it's awful. It's all tragedy. And it's somewhere in between. At this point, it's so difficult to be able to parse through it because nobody's talking who is loud enough is coming in and saying, well, let's let cooler heads prevail and look at these things from a more rational perspective and understand that there is nuance to all of this. And I guess that's what I find so disheartening is that,
Disheartening. It's disheartening.
well, it's hard to read about anything without just getting the over the top response that both sides are giving. And the thing is, they're canned responses. The facts of whatever's happening are irrelevant. It's just take the one side. If it's all good or it's all bad, and then just go with it. And whatever happened, who the fucking cares? It doesn't matter. We could be talking about anything that Trump did or has done or has suggested or has thought about doing whatever, and you're going to get the same response. MAGA is going to say it's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. It's going to make everything wonderful. You're now the Democrats saying, no, it's the most fucking terrible thing that's ever happened. It's going to destroy the planet. Where's the middle ground?
This is a scenario in both cases, both the attack on Venezuela and the shooting in Minnesota, where, interestingly, folks, our tens of listeners who may have been following us, there are times that I think I have come off as maybe on the right. And when I say right, I don't mean that I'm right. The reality is I'm probably rarely right, but I might seem a little more conservative. In this case, the middle ground, for me at least, there is no middle ground. This is what I guess I feel at this point, that the attack on Venezuela was an extreme deviation from the norms of our world, our nation. And the shooting of this woman in Minnesota also is an extreme deviation of the norms, that you shouldn't get shot. Capital punishment, the death penalty, is reserved for very specific crimes, and this woman wasn't engaged in those crimes. So I'm having a hard time finding a middle ground. I appreciate the fact that you're bringing that up, that each side is at an extreme, but I think what you're really smacking at is that the situation is so extreme that it's hard to have a middle ground. The opinions, the feelings are going to be extreme because the situation is extreme, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling comfortable right now in anything.
That's where the nuance is getting lost completely. With the attack on Venezuela, getting into the raw details and the policy isn't really what we're all about, but there is nuance. What sets it outside of the norms was that there was no international cooperation, there was no Congress involvement on an attack. Those are the things that set it outside the norms. Obviously, there are issues with how it was done. And we do ignore the question, well, should it have happened? And that's not for us to say, but it was more of the not following of the typical path to do that sort of thing. That was really what was out of line. Now, the narrative that built up to it was fabricated on false realities. And that is a huge piece of why I think it's easy to sit back and say, this is what the fuck is happening. And that's fair. That's fair.
What the fuck is happening?
But that's just it. When the nuance is on your side, you're much more willing to listen to it than when the nuance doesn't support your perspective. That's where I think we're kind of getting into this weird place where their partisanship, the deep divide, is that you take the little piece that makes sense to you and you just stick with that and you ignore any other arguments outside of that. You can't blast the caveats in a headline, a tweet. All you can really do is give the overarching thing. And so taking out Maduro was bad or taking out Maduro was good. And that's all you're going to get. But the reality is it's much more complex than that.
It is. And I think what you're hitting on is interesting. It's reminiscent of last year, actually. So when the current administration came in, they did a bunch of things really quickly. And I apologize. I know my voice is pretty raspy.
Sultry and sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for some of our tens of listeners.
I'm shooting for it because later I'm gonna narrate a erotic book, so I'm really trying to engender. At any rate, so last year there was this sense of the overwhelm that we were overwhelmed by things, and to the point where you couldn't really grasp on any single thing because there were so many things that were happening. And this last week has felt very much like that to me, that it's overwhelming. There's just too many things that are happening at once for me to grasp onto any single thing. My assumption is that this is folks, our tens of listeners are feeling this. My assumption is that the the parties, the Democrats and Republicans are feeling this. The folks who are in power are probably feeling this as well. What I'm going to propose is that we break this down, that we let's focus in on a singular thing and move forward with that. So the first thing that I want to focus on is that after the attack on Venezuela, what I have seen is the unmasking of power. Prior to, there were lots of smoke and mirrors about the rationale, about what we were doing. We're destroying these boats because 25,000 Americans die every time a boat gets through, which is completely ridiculous. Since then, the raw power has been unmasked. Stephen Miller, who is an interesting character in and of himself, but what he said was basically, we are now functioning by the law of the jungle, that power is all that matters. If you can do it, do it. That's a significant deviation from history, from how we have structured ourselves in the past. In general, we tend to have held our power as a known thing, but we used it judiciously and only when it was necessary. And what I've seen here is that this use of power has taken the mask away and basically said, we can, so we do.
But what does it feel like when someone stops caring if the story makes sense? Last week, we spoke about why this was the action that was being taken. Psychologically, it makes sense that as their internal power starts to diminish through bad polls, distrust, it makes sense that they pull the trigger on something that's going to flex more of an external power. And so we got that. We understood that. But what we're seeing now, it's not even policy. It's posturing with this administration. It's a change in how they're viewing it. Call it a de-investment in coherence. That's really what we're starting to see at this juncture, is that change. I don't need you to follow the logic. I need you to adjust. And that's kind of the signal that's being sent from the administration now. What's your take on that?
Deviation from coherence. That's beautifully stated. Oh my gosh. For our tens of listeners, I just complimented David. Oh my gosh. Oh.
All right, show's over. I'm going
Yeah,
to take it. That was it.
yeah.
Thanks. Start
Show's
the music.
over. But yes, there is a deviation from coherence. This last week, at least, there has been this sense that coherence isn't important anymore. Didn't need to be a rationale. The rationale is we can do it, so we'll do it. We want to do it, so we'll do it. That's a big difference. I guess what I'm interested in at this point is not, the administration has revealed themselves. This wasn't about drugs. This wasn't about policy. This wasn't about some greater good. This is about oil. This is about power, the demonstration of and the use of power. I am interested in is how this is going to impact fellow citizens. What's the average Joe going to feel about this? And so far, not a lot is what I'm feeling. The average person is not that impacted by this, and that scares me.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess that's maybe what was getting at before, is that the responses to these things on both sides, they're so canned, they're so expected, they're so polarized that the ability to have what is important come through isn't able to. That's where it's actually, I think, interesting from the administration perspective is as they're doing stuff, their response isn't to argue that it was the right thing to do. It is just to loudly project that everything's fine. The other side, I think, is really fucking up in their response, but only fighting it from that perspective of it's all bad. Let's take the perspective of the woman in Minnesota. This was one of those events where Tucker Carlson is coming out as a reasonable sounding voice by saying, hey, everybody, a woman just died. What the fuck are we doing arguing about any of it? But where in a situation like something like this happens, it's really easy to generate an opinion without having any of the information. And that's the problem is we're not waiting for the information. We're not waiting for the facts of it to come through. What we're doing is we're picking a side and then really, really hoping we were right. But because of the way the news cycle works, we'll never find out. We're like pundits who are picking games, right? This is the score of a football game. And then the game happens and that is wildly incorrect. And then next week, they're just fucking picking the next week's games. And nobody is pointing out that you've never been right, dude. And that's what we're doing. But why are we doing that? Why?
What else can we do?
Yeah. But that's what scares me. That's it. Is what else can we do? Why does that scares me? Because history doesn't actually repeat itself because it can't. The circumstances that surround history, you cannot repeat. But psychology does. Human psychology repeats itself over and over and over again. What I'm worried about here, that we're in a phase where power discovers it can cross boundaries and remain intact. That's where we're at. And that discovery always comes before the worst chapters, not after. That's what concerns me, is that that's the piece of history that we are in, is where the psychology is lining up that the administration, seeing that it was in trouble, took a big fucking swing and nobody is doing anything about it. And the people that could do something about it are focusing in all the wrong parts of it. And they're fighting too many battles and they're ignoring nuance. And we're just going to sit back and watch things spiraling out of control.
Yes, we are. The current situation is such that it is bigger than what most people can wrap their heads around. And because it is so big, and you're absolutely right that the administration has established that they don't have to have boundaries. They don't even have to have a rationale anymore. They can just do whatever they have the power to do. As it turns out, they have a lot of power to do those things. We're psychologically at a point where it's just overwhelming. It's big. How do you even have an opinion at this point? How do you even express that opinion? Because the powers that we're facing, the powers that be, they're going to do whatever they want to do. They've expressed the laws of the jungle that if we have this power, we're going to do it. And how do you stand against that as a citizen? I don't have an answer.
I don't know that you or I alone could possibly say this is how the individual citizen goes up against the entire administration. I don't know that everyone wants to. I think some people probably do. I don't want to leave everyone feeling hopeless and helpless, but it's more of a see what's happening, understand why it's happening this way, and hope that history doesn't repeat itself, at least thematically. Anyway, there was this one thing that kind of struck me, though, with the Venezuelan oil. When Marco Rubio was talking about the U.S. selling 30 to 50 million barrels of oil, it reminded me of Little Miss Sunshine. Do you remember that movie?
I do.
Where the grandfather has that trunk full of shrimp and that's his plan is to just sell it, but it starts to go bad before he can sell it. It's like they put out this plan that feels good, but like we'll just sell the oil. But it's not going to be that simple, right? We'll just sell 30 to 50 million barrels. Psychologically, it's this fantasy competence where they're just going to make everything better by selling all this oil and it's going to benefit everybody. What's the reality of that? They're just going to easily sell 30 to 50 million barrels of oil. Like that happens every day.
It feels to me that there was a driving force behind this, and it's been there. We touched on this last time, that there was a course of events that started with this idea that it was to protect the nation from drugs. And the narrative fell apart as soon as it extended to where we're at. At this point, what I'm feeling, and we'll see how it plays out, but the new narrative that it's about oil is also falling apart. Our ability to extract oil from this country is limited, and our ability to get American corporations back in there to extract oil there's some serious problems with
Well, the
that.
rotting shrimp, that's the problem. That's what it is. It's rotting
Yeah.
shrimp now. The smell is starting to happen, but they don't want to acknowledge it because it wasn't very well planned out. But it didn't need to be. That wasn't the point. The point wasn't that this was going to be a great plan that was going to make everyone better. It was that it sounded plausible enough that anxiety would drop. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. That's the psychological challenge, I guess, at this point, is understanding why is the administration jumping through these hoops? Why are they trying to sell shrimp they have in a bathtub?
Well, and yeah, even the oil. So last week at this time, oil seemed to be the predominant rationale. This week, as I'm watching this concept of getting the oil fall apart, it definitely feels like even that it's a red herring. It's not exactly why we did what we did. And we are back to this concept that the administration is doing things to exert power, not for an end, but just to exert power. And that's uncomfortable, to say the least.
Yeah, so we'll see what's happening. And this is happening. This one's kind of interesting as fast as it was, like the turnaround on it. Hey, we're going to protect you from drugs. Hey, we're going to get all this oil. And that's starting to fall apart as the reality of the infrastructure is not that great. It's going to cost tens of billions of dollars to get it to be functional. So is it really a reality? It's going to take years. And so the wheels are coming off. They're coming off. And then what? Like, then what's next?
Taking Greenland?
Well, yeah, I think we missed that. That was our bad. I think last week I guess we should have considered Greenland to be a target. Now, granted, they don't have a leader to overthrow, so it'd be more of a just go in there and I guess say this is ours now.
Well, and the interesting thing about Greenland is that it is a NATO-held country. So, if we just want to engage in such a way that protects Greenland, that protects the Arctic, although part of me feels like someone needs to show the administration, Donald Trump specifically, that Greenland's not as big as it looks on a flat map.
Yeah.
On a flat map, it looks huge, folks. In reality, it is, I've not run the numbers, so I don't know how to compare it. It's not massive. And if we truly just want to engage in Greenland to protect ourselves, we could do that now. We used to have 30 bases in Greenland, and now we're down to a single base. So if it was so important, utilizing our NATO connections, we could do this. We could put more bases there. No one's going to oppose that. Why we need to own it?
Okay, so to clarify, Greenland is roughly 836,000 square miles, which is 100,000 square miles smaller than if you were to combine Alaska and Texas. So it's not tiny, but it's not as big as it looks on the flat map, for sure. You know what? It reminds me of there was this video of the Pee Wee Football League. They're all lined up And the quarterback walks up behind the center, taps him on the shoulder, kind of nonchalantly to get the center to just turn around and hand him the football. And so it wasn't like a real snap. Then he just took it and he started high stepping forward like he was counting off yards. And the defense sort of stood there and let him do it. And then once everybody caught on, he took off and ran and got like a touchdown. That's what it feels like. Like we're just going to try. They're just going to try whatever because it's so outside of the realm of norm. Nobody knows how to react to it. And so it's just going to let them do it. If they decide to take Greenland, they'll just show up and say, we own this now. We live here. And everyone's going to look around and go, wait a minute. Oh, but what just happened?
The sudden focus on Greenland does absolutely feel like it's not based in reality. That, again, if we were so interested in Greenland or protecting the United States through Greenland, we have that capability right now that go to NATO, say, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z in order to protect Greenland. It would be approved immediately. So the fact that we're saying that it's not just plussing up the defenses of Greenland, that we want to make it part of the United States. And I've seen the pictures online where Greenland has like a U.S. flag. It does imply definitely that there's something else behind it, that it's not just what the verbiage is.
Does it strike you as more interesting, surprising, or something else that rather than going back and trying to reestablish norms, trying to set policies that actually would be beneficial, it's that constant grab for something else? Like these policies aren't panning out the way that we thought they would, and people aren't happy with it. So rather than adjusting the policy, say tariffs, rather than getting rid of tariffs that aren't doing what was intended or are actually hurting people the way that most economists would have told you we're going to hurt people, but they're all very stupid people, obviously, having dealt with that their entire careers. You have just different pushes for the next thing to distract from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Psychologically, this is smoke and mirrors. This is let's focus on something else. The reality is underneath it, the idea of taking Greenland is ridiculous. It is not necessary. So something else is afoot, and it is absolutely smoke and mirrors.
I don't know. You're probably right. You usually are. The smoke and mirrors piece of it, it does seem like, okay, they're doing something specifically to do something, right? Just to move forward. Is it that there's a true policy plan and this is leading up to something? Or is this just protecting ego? Is it just anything to avoid saying I was wrong?
Yes, this
Both?
no, I mean I think this is an administration that has established that they're most comfortable doing. Let's do something. It doesn't matter if it ties to policy. It's something, and that's what they're focused on.
And I agree with that, but I think it underscores like the danger of this situation is that there doesn't seem to be a clear direction. It's just a direction to do something. And as long as that something is distracting from the last something that I did, back to the Little Miss Sunshine analogy, danger isn't that the shrimp go bad. The danger is that once you've committed to the fantasy, admitting the smell becomes unbearable. So you do anything possible to not acknowledge the smell, except go back and change it.
Yeah, I think this last couple of weeks has revealed that raw demonstration of power is the point. Once you have taken off the mask, once you have revealed yourself, the drive is going to be forward, not backward. In other words, it's unlikely that they're going to put the mask back on and couch things in terms of policy. That it's really just like Stephen Miller said, we have the power, we can do this, why not?
I think from maybe just from the highest level of leadership there, or even just for those working for the highest level of leadership, it really is a waving of your left hand to slap with your right. It's just that in this way, you're waving the left hand to distract from the fact that you just slapped with the right. That's more how it feels. Now, I will point out, I do think the Democrats were wrong. It doesn't surprise me at all because when they said that Donald Trump was just going to follow Project 2025, but I also think anybody who was associated with Project 2025 was wrong when they thought Donald Trump was going to just follow Project 2025. There is nothing in there about annexing Greenland. There's no clear policy on tariffs either. And so I think this administration is kind of interesting, absolutely driven and ruled by the id of Donald Trump.
Yes. No, I'm in full agreement with you.
Anybody who thought that having a 900 plus page document guideline on what the future should look like for this country was going to be enough to convince him to do that, whether they were afraid that he was going to do that or hopeful he was going to do that, I think they're all wrong. There was no way he was going to do that. He was going to use parts of it, but only the parts that appealed to him. So I think everyone loses. Yay. Actually, that's not true. Donald Trump won. That's who won, probably wins in almost all of this is Donald Trump.
At least temporarily. Yeah. What we're seeing is his personality structure playing out over time. And history tells me that it collapses at a certain point. And right now, though, there's almost a frenetic kind of sense to the things we're doing. There's an energy that goes beyond the necessity of the situation. So, yeah, I think we're entering a dangerous time. To harken back to our Avatar episode, the Avatar is cracking, but as long as there's some external thing, energy-wise, it gives us as people something to focus on, to talk about, whether it's relevant or not. I mean, there's just so many things happening at once that the relevancy of our opinions are questionable.
As the Avatar cracks, as it starts to fall apart, it's held together by the external champions of it. The thing that pushes them to be champions of it is the opposition to that.
Mm-hmm.
To get back to where we started, when you have this polarization to where you take a side and you leave out all the nuance, you inadvertently empower the avatar if you're opposed to it by opposing it without nuance. And I think that's the mistake that's being made by the Democratic side, not using their voice to acknowledge to some extent some of the pros that might happen in some of these circumstances. All you're doing is you're pushing the other side away rather than drawing them forward. And the avatar survives. When the power realizes it no longer has to explain itself, especially when it's being rewarded for not explaining itself, that's the moment that everything else starts to rot quietly. And right now, the Democratic side is perpetuating that inadvertently by attacking the other side too much, I guess. I'm not saying to not oppose, because I think there's certainly many, many reasons to oppose. But when you do so in a way that doesn't concede when there are pros, what you've done is you've painted the other side into a corner that all they can do is defend it and support it without accepting that maybe there's something wrong here. And that's what's happening. Now, I don't want to say it's the Democrats' fault. It's not their fault. MAGA is a tough, tough pill to swallow if you're not MAGA. But when they're supported blindly by their faithful, but they're being driven by the push of the other side, it's not helpful. And so that's what I see, if that makes sense.
A great deal. What we have established in the last couple of weeks is that there is no reason to mask power, and the administration has the power. They're going to use the power, and it puts their opposition on the defensive. And what we're seeing is that the defense, the left, the Democrats, are trying to engage in this cogent debate on the merits, and the merits are irrelevant. What's important is doing what they want to do. It might be problematic.
Could be a problem. Yeah.
Could be a problem.
Could be a problem. So we see what's happening. We understand why it's happening, I think.
I don't know if we do understand it. And that might be the crux of this, is that for most of us, we're trying desperately to find a cogent explanation for why what is happening. Here's the uncomfortable part is that what happens if there's no other reason than, we can do it, so we're doing it, that there's not a bigger picture. There's not a bigger explanation than that the idea, like taking out Maduro, it was an idea that someone wanted. We ended up putting on the back end, not on the front end, but on the back end, we put some framework to it. This is the rationale. And it started out as, narco terrorism, which now lives in my head. That on the back end, we put out this explanation, and then, then it happened. And now we've put out an explanation that it's about oil. Well, that's kind of playing out. It's not very realistic.
Well, it could have been about oil. It's just not going to work.
It's not going to work. I don't know if it was really about oil.
I think it was about distracting from the reality that you have a bunch of failed policies that aren't going to work. It's the next thing to distract from that. Most of this is just a way to pad the ego of our leader. It's, I deserve a peace prize. I deserve these accolades.
Yeah,
all of this is
I
that.
love the fact the true elected leader who did win the Peace Prize, she's not been reinstalled. And the rationale behind that is because our leader is offended that he didn't get the Peace Prize. Now, this is in the context of invading, attacking another country, which probably precludes the potential of getting the Peace Prize.
The current situation is that she's considering giving him her Peace Prize, which really doesn't mean anything, with the hopes of getting placed in the position of power. So there's, it is what that is. I don't know, but I don't think this is we're doing it because we can. I think we're doing it because it popped into somebody's head as a way to garner more support for what are non-effective or not panning out policies. It's trying to buy cheap votes. And because they can do it, they're going to do it and say, look how good we've done. It's attaboys is what it is. But it's attaboys for things that, you're not going to be happy about. Like when you're potty training your toddler and they come to you and say, I pooped on the potty, and you discover that actually they took a dump in a pan, well-meaning, it wasn't in their pants. So good for you, son, but maybe don't shit in a pot.
Well, and, as all these things progress, what happens if there is no cogent explanation? What impact does that have?
Is there ever a cogent explanation for why your 2-year-old shit in a pot? He didn't shit in his pants, right?
Well,
so
way to go, kiddo. We desire an explanation. We desire.
I want you to use a toilet, kid. That's what I want.
Well, we desire a narrative that supports our actions, and we want it to fit in the context of the national narrative. And what happens if right now what's happening doesn't? It just doesn't. Like us attacking Venezuela does not fit in the narrative. Our desire for, and however it's going to play out, of Greenland doesn't fit in the narrative. We're all left to just sit with this incompatible narrative. And how do we do that?
Because we're making everything so black and white, that makes this worse. It's the unwillingness to see the gray. And this is true anywhere, right? This is true with our patients who only see in black and white, see things from good or all bad. They really struggle with life, don't they?
Yes.
They struggle with relationships. And so we're doing the same thing as a country where we've shifted to this black and white perspective, and we're not seeing the gray areas. And I think in order to bring people back together, because that's ultimately what stops it, what stops this from moving forward, and these incoherent acts that have no seeming reason for being, they're empowered by the black and white perspective, the fighting. When you look at some of the gray area and you can concede on either side that it's not all bad. It may be mostly bad, but it's not all bad. Getting rid of Maduro is not all bad.
No.
Right?
No, he's a bad guy.
He's a terrible guy. The way they went about it wasn't okay. But that needs to be stated really clearly, which is good. We're glad that he's not there, but we would have liked our norms to have been the predominating reason. We would have liked a more coherent plan that followed our policies to drive that. And that's where you're not pushing away every other side. And now I think you and I have had that as our mission with this from the get go, which was to try to bring people closer to the center on all sides, right? To help people
Mhm.
communicate with one another more effectively because it's in that valley of distrust and hate and infighting that an administration like this one survives. Most of the time, I think fairly logically. I can't tell you what's going to happen next. All I can tell you is that from a psychological perspective, it's not going to stop with this push for Greenland. It's going to be something else. And then maybe we should get the prescriptions because I think that's where we're at. So, what our listeners can do from a prescription standpoint is don't let your entire identity get conscripted into outrage, loyalty, or resignation. Total identification on any side is how thinking collapses. So, maintain one internal position that stays curious, skeptical, and slow. And that's not disengagement, that's psychological resistance.
That's a good one. You're hitting at part of the problem is that if it's crazy, trying to put a framework around it is playing into crazy. And, what I think we're seeing is that so many of these events, these policies, the motivation isn't tied to a policy.
It's not tied to reality.
Yeah. When the left tries to answer it, their answer isn't tied to reality. So they're left with something more
They're
challenging.
running around like Mugatu saying, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
And they are.
Yeah. It's
All
the
right.
same look.
Yeah. All right. I have a prescription. Leaders must decide whether coherence still matters because power without a narrative eventually eats its own rationale. And that's kind of where we're at right now. There is no coherent narrative. And those who are making decisions need a narrative. That narrative needs to march into the future. And right now, they just don't have that.
And my last one would be shift your evaluative frame from legality to conditioning. So, what we normalize emotionally shapes future thresholds more than any single decision. So, ask yourself if this becomes routine, who do we become psychologically?
Nothing good. Nothing
It could be a
good.
problem.
All right.
My catchphrase.
Yeah, it might be a problem. The public, and that's us, the public must tolerate moral discomfort without demanding instant relief. Numbness is not neutrality. And right now, I think a lot of us are experiencing numbness, and we shouldn't. Numbness is not a solution. If we are involved in this democracy, numbness is not the way we do that. So I do think, regardless of how overwhelming all these things are right now, we have to fight that urge to be just numb about it. And I'll admit I'm numb right now, but I'm trying.
And that White Claw is really helping.
It is.
All right. Well, I think we've hit our end on this episode. Hopefully, it helps people a little bit to come up with some kind of framework to work through this stuff. It is going to be uncomfortable. It needs to be uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable. We don't want to live numb, but we also don't want to just isolate and alienate anybody that you don't agree with. That's what perpetuates these things. So that's it for me. Robbie, anything?
I've got nothing.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody who stuck around. We really do appreciate you, our tens of listeners. And please share us with your friends. Smash that subscribe, hit like, do what you can. As long as you guys are here, we'll keep pushing out what we think is good content. Or maybe we're just two crazy people drinking and
Maybe,
gabbing.
maybe we're lacking the narrative is
We might
the
be.
problem.
We might be. All right. Well, I think that's it.
All right, roll the
Cue up
music.
that new music. I like it. Cue it up. We're out.